I'm glad you're able to join us today for our Midweek Devotional. My name is Sean Barrett. Glad you're here today. Tonight, I invite you to come back here at 7 p.m. for Songs at 7 with our musician Lucy Shue. And then, of course, on Sunday morning at 10:30, we'll have the regular sermon and song. Obviously, I am recording this a few hours before you will see it. It is daybreak. And I love the early morning. I love the early morning because of all the little details of the world waking up. You'll see cars going by as people go to work, but you'll also see behind me the sun will begin to peek up above those trees. If I'm quiet, you can hear the birds. Maybe a few bugs waking up. The whole world is coming to life. And this coming Sunday is Holy Trinity Sunday. And I won't be preaching on this on Sunday, but I want to reflect on the psalm for this coming Sunday. It's Psalm 8. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes, to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than God, and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. I had never noticed this before, but I was listening to a podcast with a pastor whose name is Delmer Chilton. Pastor Delmer is up in Brasstown, North Carolina. But he pointed out that in verse 3, it says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established. Now we know that God does not have fingers, that God is spirit, but why would the psalm writer refer to God's fingers? As I think back to my college days, I did construction work in the summers. I worked as a subcontractor and helped to build houses, and so I was working with my hands, and when you work with your hands, you can really do some pretty big things. I remember framing homes and setting trusses, hanging sheetrock, hanging doors and windows, siding, and I loved that kind of work because when you're done, you can see the work of your hands. And many of my neighbors here, they use their hands to control large machines and are able to farm acres and acres of land, raise cattle, big things. But the psalm writer talks about the work of God's fingers. As I think about work we do with our fingers, well, that's detail work. I took this picture of a painting that our church secretary, Andrea Gardner, did while we were cleaning the office up and painting the walls. There was an old map of Rowan County hanging there, and we took that down, and she noticed it had a wonderful frame, and so she just flipped around the insert and painted this on the back. It's a verse from another psalm, "Be still and know that I am God." At times that is a very appropriate verse to have in a church office. But as I look at the art, the care she took with the paint strokes and the color selection. That's detail work. And the psalmist says, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, all the universe, that's detail work for God. God is so big that the entire universe that's detail work. That's not big for God, that's detail work. The known universe is 93 billion light years wide. That's huge. That means if you were able to travel at the speed of light, a little bit over 186,000 miles per second, not hour, if you traveled at that speed, it would take you 93 billion, with a B, billion years to get from one end to the other. The work of God's fingers. And within that, you imagine all the countless galaxies. Within those galaxies, different solar systems. Within those systems, planets. And among all those planets, you have Earth. And on Earth, God has this creation called humans, people. And God has made us just a little bit lower than God. And so the psalm writer is thinking, with all you've made, God, with the universe just being the work of your fingers, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? We are made in the image of God, and so our lives are meant to reflect some of God's glory. Just as the psalmist is moved to praise as he looks at creation and sees how much God has worked, the work of God's fingers, that all of these birds we're hearing, the sunrise behind me, the trees, all of these also reflect the glory of God. And this is just the work of God's fingers. This is not a big project for God. Well, these are devotionals. They're not meant to be sermons. But as you go through your week, I want you to reflect on the details of your own life, the work of your fingers. Church is not just something we do together for an hour or two on Sunday mornings. As people of God, our whole lives should reflect the glory of God. And as we look at our nation and the turmoil it is experiencing right now, as you watch the news and consider your reaction to what's going on, I challenge you to look at those events through God's eyes, to remember your identity, to not just jump on the bandwagon of whoever the most friends on Facebook are supporting, but instead to look at these events from the perspective as a child of God. The details of your life. How do we take in the news? How do you relate to your coworkers? How do you care for your neighbor? And as we look at the details of our lives, the work of our fingers, we begin to see that even the smallest things are not insignificant, because the life of faith is made up of these things. And as we see that image of God in other people, it causes us to pause and consider not only their equality with us, but how they too reflect God's image.